Jesus was teaching at shul one Shabbat. It's the kind of a thing that he did quite a lot. Just then appeared a woman in trouble, walking real slow. She was bent over double. Jesus sensed a spirit of defeat in the air that was weighing her down with worry, with care. And it didn't escape Jesus' own observation that this spirit showed a physical manifestation. So he stopped his teaching since he lost concentration, and he sensed that she'd be open to rehabilitation. And he called to the woman, and he said, "Please be free from this crippling ailment, this spiritual disease. For God wants you to heal, so straighten up slowly. God sees all people's needs as holy." He laid hands on her. I'm sure he asked her permission. And soon she was free of this oppressive condition. And she stood up real straight, free from malaise. Her soul cried out. She started singing God's praise. This story could have ended there. Her health had been restored, but there's always someone who wants to stick in their oar. The sheriff of the synagogue grew indignant as Jesus felt that what had just happened was somehow egregious. And he turned to the crowd and he scolded them because of his concern that this healing ran afoul of Sabbath laws. 6 days of the week are when work should be done. Out of all 7, we reserve only one for rest and for prayer, for praise and contemplation. Keep that 7th day special. We all need restoration. Sabbath is separate. It's not just a word. Use the other 6 days to come and be cured. "Hey," Jesus said, "why do you talk to the crowd? If your problem's with me, you should say so aloud. Here's my problem with you, and you need to consider it. Why, you people with power soon become the biggest hypocrites." Here's where I think your scolding gets wonky, because anyone here with an ox or a donkey would untie your animal and lead it away to give it some water, even on the Sabbath day. And if you do that, just to bring them to water, you must wish relief here for Abraham's daughter, who was bound by disease for 18 long years, and now stands up straight and set free, it appears. So don't use your power to act like a tyrant. When Jesus said that, his opponents were silent. The crowd, though, had gathered, and they now came to voice. This wonderful cure caused them all to rejoice. And I think that this story might help us get schooled, how obeying our God may mean breaking some rules. And when faced with those laced with unjust superiority, we may sometimes need to distrust their authority and be called once in a while to challenge that authority. At the outset, I'm done with the poem. At the outset, I should say that I have this uneasy relationship with authority. That really surprises a lot of you, I know. But when somebody tells me not to do something, it almost always triggers deep within me the strong desire to do it. It's, I think, a psychological relic of my misspent, misanthropic youth. It's the reason I can't even follow a recipe. Who are you to tell me how much cinnamon to put in here? This week, we borrowed my sister's car, and it's not a new car, but it's a much newer car than anything we usually drive. And it's one of those cars that beep at you whenever you go near a line on the roadway. I know that's helpful. I know that's a really good idea. I know the car is doing that for our own safety. But there's something about it that drives me crazy. We borrowed the car to go up to Connecticut and go tubing down a river. And of course, when we got to the place to rent the tubes, before we were allowed near the river, we were subjected to a whole list of rules that we had to follow. I know they were good rules, good ideas, really just for our own safety. But still, that same reaction. As parents, Charlene and I soon discovered that having a few rules was indeed helpful in keeping our kids alive. But our attempt at creating reasonable rules soon prompted Jesse and Harry to come up with this rallying cry: less rules, more fun. Less rules, more fun. Somebody reminded me recently that the reason we have rules is because there's more than one of us in the world. Having rules is how we are able to function in a complex society. And most rules are indeed there for a purpose. That was certainly true of the Sabbath rules back in the time of Jesus. These laws had and still have a number of important rules behind them. They help people honor God by refraining to do anything creative on the seventh day, which marks the day when God also rested from the act of creating. These rules provide an enforced time of rest for workers who might otherwise not get a break. They break the pattern of life with a day of unplugging from routine. And there are other reasons as well. So I can understand why the leader of the synagogue gets so upset at all the people coming for healing on the Sabbath. There are 6 other days, he says. Come some other day, he says. Of course, as far as we know, the bent-over woman doesn't come to the synagogue that Sabbath looking for healing. She comes to the synagogue to pray, to worship, to learn, to praise God like everybody else who's there. But Jesus spots her. He sees her. After all, Jesus is the one who notices things. As the embodiment, the incarnation of the love that God has for all people, the task of Jesus, the purpose of Jesus, is to love not just in generalities, but also in specifics. To love not just humanity, but to do love with individual humans in specific situations. And to do that, you need to be able to, and willing to notice people, to notice what's going on with people. And once Jesus notices her, he calls out to her to see what he can do to help her get unstuck from whatever it is that's causing her to be bent down physically and emotionally and spiritually. A few weeks back, we were hiking up mountains in the middle of Ireland, and my son Harry was constantly reminding me to look up as I walked. He insisted that looking up helps you move along towards where you're going. You see the goal ahead of you, and that gives you a lift towards that goal, which doesn't happen when you're looking down all the time, as I usually do. I tried it once, but I tripped on a rock and I fell on my face. But Jesus, I think, Jesus agrees with Harry. Jesus is concerned enough about this bent-over person to call to her and reach out to her and help her straighten herself up so she could walk forward fearlessly towards the rest of her life. And so this unnamed woman chooses to let herself be lifted, to let herself be freed of the things that are bearing her down and keeping her down. As Dr. King urged people, you need to stand up straight because nobody can ride your back unless it's bent. With the concert coming up here in September by the folk duo Mamuse, I've been hearing a lot of their songs in my head. Their songs with their gentle, encouraging lyrics helped our whole church community get through the pandemic. Songs like, "We shall be known by the company we keep, by the ones who circle round to tend these fires. We shall be known by the ones who sow and reap the seeds of change alive from deep within the earth. It is time now. It is time now that we thrive. It is time to lead ourselves into the well. It is time now, and what a time to be alive. In this great turning, we will learn to lead in love." The story of the bent-over woman, though, reminds me of a different song of theirs that goes something like this. I'm gonna let myself be lifted. I'm gonna let myself be lifted. I'm gonna let myself be lifted. By and by, I will lay my troubles down by the water, where the river will never run dry. If you want to know how it really goes, you have to come on the 7th of September. By working together, Jesus and our bent-over friend work together for her healing, and she's bent over no more. Of course, all that is what provokes the ire of this officious official who claims that Jesus is breaking the rules by healing her, by lifting her up, and that she is breaking rules by coming and letting herself be lifted. Lately, I have been thinking a lot about rule making and rule breaking. I think we all might agree with Jesus that the legitimate purpose of rules is so that all people can live full lives of safety and health and integrity, for lifting people up and helping people lift themselves up. To be honest, though, I feel that so many of the rules and laws we've been witnessing over the last several months, they seem to be designed not for lifting people up, but for putting people down and keeping people down. I don't know what Jesus would think about that. We can see that in the area of how we treat immigrants and other very vulnerable people. We can see it in the targeting of homeless people and poor people and queer people. I don't have to fill you in on the myriad ways that those in the halls of power are using rules to keep certain categories of people bent over, bent over, bent over. What strikes me as a little ironic is that those currently making those rules have proven quite proficient at breaking rules when it suits their purpose. And Jesus has a word, here in this passage, has a word for people like that. He calls them hypocrites. I might sometimes use other words. But hypocrite is an interesting word. You know what the Greek word for hypocrite is? Anyone? Hypocrite, yeah, very good. Hypocrite. It means, well, literally it means actors. Sorry, no shade on those of you in that profession, but the implication of the word hypocrite in Greek and in English is towards people who act a part, not on the stage, but who act a part in their lives. More precisely, a hypocrite is defined as a person who pretends to have virtues, moral or religious beliefs, principles, etc., that they do not actually possess, or a person whose private life and actions belie their public statements. That could be a pretty good description of any one of us, I suppose, but some more than others. In Jesus' view, rules that are designed not to lift people up, but to keep people down, keep people bent over, are rules that are made to be broken, are rules that are made to be broken. Broken not for the sake of breaking them, but because for people of faith, there is a rule that takes priority. There is a law that takes priority. the love commandment. The commandment to love as you would be loved, to love your neighbor as yourself, to love the foreigner as one of your own. This love commandment runs all through our scriptures, and it runs through other faiths and religions as well. The commandment to love, to do love to other people. That's the rule above all other rules. We're in a strange place right now, I think, a strange collective space. We're getting to the point where, as people of faith, we may be called on to break a few rules in order to be faithful to that love commandment, to that commandment to love as we would be loved. In order to continue to lift ourselves up and to help and encourage others to stand up straight. We need to stand up straight and encourage everybody to stand up straight, to refuse to be bowed, to refuse to be cowed, to refuse to stand by while vulnerable people are singled out and ostracized and victimized, harassed and disappeared and deported. And that's not a political statement. I think that's our calling as Christians, as we try in our own hesitant and feeble way to follow the Jesus who refused to ignore the suffering of others, refused to stand by when there was something he could do about that suffering, and who challenged anybody who tried to deny the rights of other people to live a full and a faithful life. So stand up. Oh, I mean it. Stand up. Let's practice. Stand up if you're able. Sit up. Otherwise, as straight as you can, and see what's ahead of you. Not me, but your life and the work that God calls us all to do. And let's stand up straight as we sing together the words of the Canticle of the Turning from the Halls of Power.